Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy Wednesday right before the holidays to join us. I'm Dan Hogdahl. I'm a director of business development for Morse. We provide contact center solutions that are built on Amazon Connect. And I am joined here today by Chris Lavoie and Brad Fitzgerald, both directors at Penobscot Regional Communications Center in Penobscot, Maine. And I wanted to invite these two gentlemen to the discussion today because they have a phenomenal story with a non-emergency call diversion solution called Morse CivicFlow that is powered by Amazon Connect. They went live, it's been almost a
Year
year
ago.
now, and they've seen terrific outcomes in the way that they're able to serve their community better, the way that they're able to provide a better experience for their dispatchers amidst what we're all seeing across the nation right now, which is a staffing shortage in PSAPs and dispatch centers. And this solution is built to alleviate that while giving a higher level of service to the constituents of your particular county. So enough from me. We'll jump into it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. As always, I greatly appreciate your time. And I figured we could start out with just from the beginning. There are, I'm sure, some people in the audience that aren't familiar with your story. So I'd love to start with why you first identified, hey, we need a new solution, and then walk us through how you ended up making your decision to go with Morse and Amazon Connect. I think it'd be great to start there.
Yeah, so I think first, if you had told me 5 years ago that I was going to be doing this today, I would have told you that probably wasn't going to happen, and I would have laughed. Um, Really, how this all came to fruition is networking at a conference. So we had our main NINA conference in 2023. One of the instructors was Jim Lake from Charleston County, South Carolina. And Jim and the staff at Charleston County had started using this because their staffing level was right around, I want to say it was between like 50 and 60%. So, in talking with them about it, our staffing levels were at the time not that low, but close. Um, and and it continued to get worse. So after the conference, I had reached out to Jim and I wanted to learn more about AWS and how he was taking non-emergency calls and diverting them to AWS and an online reporting tool. Um, from there, Brad and I had a lot of tough discussions and decisions that we needed to make because we knew that this was probably going to change the game and change the job.
Mm.
For years, when you call your local police department, you're always talking to someone. Or when you call your local fire department, you are always talking to someone. You call your local dispatch center, you are always talking to someone. And that is completely different than what we're doing today, right?
Mm.
So really just having that discussion with Brad and realizing that our staffing level was getting down near 50%. Every year, annually, the calls increase. And when I say the calls increase, I don't necessarily mean that the severity of the calls increase. I think that the public is putting an unrealistic expectation on public servants, whether it be the 911 emergency telecommunicator or the police officer working the beat. They are putting an unrealistic expectation on us as public servants by handling things that we've never handled in the past. 20 years ago, if I had a problem with how you were pushing snow out of your driveway, I would come talk to you man to man.
Yep.
And we would have that discussion and we would come to a gentleman's agreement. Today, they're involving law enforcement. Now, that's not necessarily an emergency. So with the fact that our staffing was decreasing, thankfully now since we've talked to the podcast, we've filled most of our positions.
Oh, good.
Um, but the job has changed, the calls have changed, and with that, you got to find a way to change. So we need to change the way we deliver services. I cannot answer to someone and say, I'm sorry that we were delayed getting to your cardiac arrest call
Mm,
because we were dealing with a fireworks complaint, or we were dealing with someone's mailbox that had been hit with a baseball bat a week ago.
mm.
That's just not right. So we need to change the flow of how we handle those calls. Those calls are still very important and we need to handle them, but we need to triage them. So how do we triage them if we don't have more people? We give someone an online reporting tool so that they can file their own complaint. We're still going to get to it, but we're still allowing our employees to handle true emergencies, which at the end of the day is what our main mission is.
Yeah.
Brad, you got anything to
That's,
add on that?
I was going
I
to ask
do.
Brad anything.
I think, what Chris touched on at the end is very much correct. Like if you were to talk to a lot of our staff, they're going to tell you that they're here to handle emergencies. And a lot of their stress would come from, you know, they're taking an emergency call and they hang up that call and those non-emergent calls are ringing and ringing and ringing. At the same time, another 911 call is ringing. They truly want to do the job. They want to help people, but they're here to deal with the emergencies. And I think there's definitely that balance where, we need to, like Chris said, make them available to deal with those emergencies and, try and find that balance for those non-emergent calls, which yes, they are still important. And, when somebody calls for a service, they still want to be, have an answer. They want someone to respond to them, but we just had to find ways to try and create that balance for our employees and try and balance the workload better. And I think that has definitely been a start. Like I use this analogy many times when we've talked about this, as Chris said, times have changed and our society has changed. And we definitely see it now when we made this change. Our more elder population is used to making that phone call and talking to somebody, whereas our younger generation is used to doing everything on their phone. They're used to doing everything by app. They're used to doing everything by text messages. They're not used to talking to people on the phone. So, we had talked about an online reporting tool before this kind of even came up, and thankfully they both were able to coincide together, and they work very well together. So we were able to, kind of do both things at once, and it's helped us. But like I say, in today's day and age, nobody calls the pizza shop anymore and orders a pizza. Everybody gets
Yeah.
online and does it on an app.
Yep.
And this is giving us a tool to allow that option to our citizens, to give them another tool, another way to contact us, especially for those non-emergent things. And I think that this has definitely made an impact.
Oh, it absolutely has. We're seeing the results, and we're going to talk about those results, put some numbers to the outcomes in a moment. But speaking of your citizens, I think back to our conversation we had in May, Chris, and you talked about informing the public. And I know that's something that's important for many PSAPs around the country that I've talked to is how do we inform our citizens of this change? And of course, do it in a way that will communicate that it is better for everybody because it is, and assure them that it won't be disruptive. Can you touch on maybe how you've done that? And also, I'd love to hear your advice for other PSAPs who are thinking about this change and how to do that effectively.
So we did some press conferences with local news stations and with the local newspaper for our county, and that worked well. Other than the fact that they took my 20-minute informational session and they chopped it up into a 45-second story.
Mm.
And a lot of the information was not portrayed correctly.
Okay.
So, one of the biggest things that I think helped us in this was I got to go on a local radio station, the Voice of Maine, and speak about it, like we are right now. They gave me a 20-minute block, and I got to talk about the job, how society has changed, how the job has changed, what we are facing every single day, and why we need to make these changes. And there's some very influential people that listen to that morning show. Excuse me. And that was probably one of the turning points for getting a little bit of positive traction with this, rather than AI's taking over the world and you know all of that stuff. But I think even going forward, one thing that we've been talking about and potentially looking at is doing quick public service announcements that we can publish on social media and really push that out. It doesn't need to be as detailed as this, right? It can be something as quick as, did you know? If you have a non-emergent report, like a criminal mischief complaint, or you want to share information with us, go to this website and file this complaint, or call and we'll send you a text message with a link. And it's that easy, right? I think that as we've gone on, we have learned that we still need to push that message out. And again, no matter how much you push a message out, you cannot control how effective it's going to be listened to, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
you can't control the public and what they are doing, what they're paying attention to. So you're still going to hear from people that are confused about what the system is, and that's fine. But as those come in, you know, walk people through it and educate them, and that's what we've done.
Good. Brad, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that that's exactly, what, the direction that we've headed. I mean, we've definitely had some feedback, which has helped us make changes and grow with this to make this more effective. And I think that's one thing that we'll continue with, because we have got feedback from the public. We've gotten feedback from, police chiefs, fire chiefs. So I think it's in what we like about this is it's evolving. Like, we're not set to one standard. We can change with it. And I think that's a big part of this that I think some people are leery of when they talk about making this change. Is they think that, it's set in stone. Like, once I go to this, I can't change it. I can't modify it. And as we've learned, that's not the case at all. And I think that's a big piece of this, for people to understand, is it is so customizable to your needs, that it's really endless what you could do and how much you wanted to put into it.
Oh, absolutely. And someone like Morse would certainly help you set it up and make sure that it's firing on all cylinders right away. So let's talk about that a little bit too. There might be some people in the audience that are wondering, okay, this all sounds good, but how do I get started? How do I deploy the technology? What are the right questions to ask? And Brad, you make a great point of it can evolve over time. It can change over time based on feedback from your employees, feedback from constituents, feedback from police chiefs and fire chiefs. I think that's fantastic. You're getting feedback from other public service leaders in the community. But I'd love to hear your take on that and how you got started, and advice for others who maybe are thinking about taking the leap, but don't exactly know where to start or who to work with.
So for us, I mean, after I talked to Jim about how he was using it, we reached out to AWS directly and spoke with them. Um, and then obviously, I do not possess the knowledge to be able to run the system. So I am not a very tech savvy person. That's when AWS let us know that they have partners, and Morse is one of those partners. So that is how you and I met. And they were able to connect my agency and your company. And from there, we came up with a proof of concept. Um, it wasn't easy. There was a lot of meetings, a lot of time invested on both sides, us and Morse. And then after that proof of concept was developed, we turned it on live so that we could call in and do test calls. It wasn't on our phone system yet, but it was live in the background. And then after that, I think it was 2 weeks of doing test calls, Brad. We decided to go live. And, it was, I want to say, quick, easy, and painless going live because it was. But I think within the first couple of days, we had already identified um, some things and that need to be corrected. And it was so easy for us to just call um, you or one of your coworkers and say, "Hey, we need to correct this," and then have you make that change for us. So, and it when I say that there was an issue that needed to be changed, I don't mean it as there was an issue with AWS. I mean, the adage, you got to think like the criminal to catch the criminal. You got to think like the public to catch the public too, right? So something that made sense to Brad and I when we're writing ideas down on paper doesn't make sense to the general person in the public. And that's where we get hung up a lot, was how we worded our questioning, because we've been doing this for 15 years, and you public safety has a certain lingo to it. And if you're not using plain, clear English, you're not going to capture your callers here. They're going to be confused by the questioning. So that's been probably the biggest thing that we've made changes on in the past year, is the language and how we ask the question. Now I would say that we've got it pretty well ironed out, and it's working really well. I haven't heard any negative feedback for well over 3 months. So
Good. Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's terrific insight, especially for anyone thinking about deploying this. Are there any other changes that come to mind? Any other maybe misconceptions that you had when you first went live that you'd really had to change course on over the past year?
No, I don't think so. I think that this is only one piece of what
Yeah.
we did, right?
Yeah.
We never used online reporting. So we flipped the switch to everything at once. So it was a big change, because they kind of go hand in hand. You can't necessarily you can use AWS without an online reporting solution, but it wasn't what was going to work for us. We needed something that was going to take that information to get our employees off the phone. They're sticking with the 911 phone, and they're taking those complaints. We want to take those non-emergent complaints and get them off our business lines and put them into online reporting. So I think I will say probably one of the best things is the fireworks um, flow that we built. I know that our Um, Percentages have probably gone down since, because right now it's just in there like we're just taking complaints.
Mm.
But from Memorial Day to the 4th of July, having that fireworks flow in AWS, you could just watch the statistics go up. So that was catching a lot of people, and that's just one certain time of the year. I know we've been busy with the holidays, but Brad and I are going to sit down and we're going to work on storm flows that we can turn on and off when we have large storms, or when there's widespread power outages, so we're not getting those calls. And we're going to work on roads, road closures. But to touch on how the fireworks one worked, when you called in, it would ask you if you wanted to file a fireworks complaint, and you would say yes. From there, it would ask you if you were familiar with your municipality's ordinance on consumer fireworks. If you said yes, then it would roll you over to, do you want to file an online report? And you could have the option of filing an online report on that fireworks complaint. If you said that you were not familiar with your local municipality's ordinance, it would send you the link to the state fire marshal's office website, and it would automatically pop up on your phone the entire list of all of the consumer fireworks ordinances in the state of Maine. So you could scroll down to your municipality, click on it, and go, oh, consumer fireworks are legal here. I guess I've got no complaint. And it would end it. And we had a lot of luck with that. So that will definitely be coming back in 2025. But yeah, so I would say that right now it's running, gathering some complaints for us every day and taking a little bit of work off the employees who are already overworked.
Well, that's fantastic as well. And you made a very interesting point a few minutes ago about when that was turned on, watching the numbers change in real time, or at least at the end of the day. Those
Yeah.
analytics are very important because that's going to inform you how to make your system better for your agents, for the people calling in. It's also going to help you just understand your citizens better. What do they care most about? What are the reasons they're calling in? That's very valuable data. And I don't think most PSAPs have anything like that. That's no fault of their own. They're just not able, they don't have a system that's conducive to collecting data and certainly not being able to make or take meaningful action based on that data. So I'd like to double click into that a little bit if you can. Is there any data in particular you've really honed in on to optimize your system? What are some of your favorite analytics and learnings that you've taken away from the data coming in, if you don't mind sharing that?
I will say that when we kind of did our first test run, um, we learned a lot in the first 2 weeks, which helped us make changes, like Chris said before, to capture more why people were calling. Because in those first couple of weeks, the way that our script was written, it basically was just letting people say dispatch. And that was like such a high number of what they were calling for, but we weren't capturing why they were calling. Like, we knew they were calling dispatch, but they were just telling us again that they were calling dispatch. So I think as we, um, like you had said, Dan, like having those analytics is a big piece of this, because you don't truly realize some of the things that people call for. And then when you kind of hone in on that and you can make the changes to get some better information from them, it was very staggering what we found out. So the utterances would be the big thing for me that we learned from.
Great.
I would agree. I think did we run that for 2 weeks or 4? Just collecting the utterances.
I think it was 2 weeks the first time around.
Yeah.
And then we
So
identified some changes, and then we made the changes, and then we ran it longer um, to find out. And we obviously saw a change. We were getting better information. There
right.
was a change in the utterances that we weren't just getting that standard dispatch answer. We were getting the real reason why they were calling, just because we worked with Morse, and like Chris had mentioned earlier, Morse is way more savvy at this than we are. Um, so they helped us, tailor our language to capture more information, and they gave us ideas of things that we probably would have never thought about, which helped us gather way more accurate analytics in the utterances to be able to better build our system, make it more customizable to what our population was that we serve.
I think one of the biggest things that I looked at along the way was um, how many people made it all the way through, right up until the end. Um, and really, because I wanted to learn whether people who were calling in were getting frustrated and disconnecting early, or if they were going through the entire call flow. So that was probably what was right next to the utterances with Brad. That was probably the next um, analytic that I looked at. That was all great data that was provided that really drove how we moved forward. Whether we went route A or route B was what the data told us.
Okay. And has it been pretty easy for you to self-serve in that regard, for you to look at the data and make those changes? Have you leaned on Morse more so to help you interpret the data and make changes? Has that evolved over time? Could you speak on that a little bit?
I think it's definitely evolved over time. I think at first we were looking at things, and I mean, I didn't even want to log into AWS because I was afraid I was going to break something.
Yeah.
Um, but over time, you get a little bit more comfortable with it. Um, the the team at Morse was able to help us better understand how to operate in the system, how to pull that data. Um, and I think that as time has gone on, it's easier for us just to look at it and go, okay, we got to make a change. Um, but I would say that in the beginning, it was very intimidating to get in that system.
I bet. And Brad, did you have something to add?
So I would agree with all of that. And I think a big piece for us in the beginning when we had that intimidation fear was to have someone truly there to help us along the way, because, they more definitely made us feel like they weren't just going to, here you go, this is how you use it, best of luck.
Yeah.
um, they guided us through the whole process, through what everything means and how to make the changes, and what changing this can change that. And so there was very good coaching along the way, and we never felt like we were alone and that we didn't have help, and that because I felt the same way, like I don't dare log in this, gonna break something. um, but we also always felt like if we break something, they'll help us fix it. And that was a big piece for me, because it gave me the comfort in the system and using it, um, in case we did do something. Like, we did have the help, we did have the support. We weren't going to be left alone to figure it out. And I think that's a big piece of this, because you're already making a real big change anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And to try and do it with no help or no support could be disastrous. And could lead to the failure of the change and of the program, because you just don't have the support. And that's one thing we've never felt like, is we've always had that support.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that we've been doing our jobs. So would it be fair to say that if one of your peers at a PSAP anywhere in the country had a real desire to learn Amazon Connect, how to make changes, how to interpret the data and make decisions based on the data, that they could do it themselves at some point, maybe not right away, like we talked about, but at some point get to a place where they could largely do it themselves with their own team?
You mean like
Absolutely.
making modifications? Yes, most definitely. We have a lot of large infrastructure projects going on right now, and both Brad and I do not have the time to dedicate to learning something new, especially something like this. But yeah, I mean, there's centers. I think the last number that I got was 24 centers in the country have implemented this. And I know at least a handful of them that are doing everything in house. And if you have a strong IT department, I'm not saying we don't. I'm just saying they're a little overtasked. Um, but if you have a strong IT department and you can dedicate someone to it, then yeah, I think that they could easily pull that off. Um, Myself right now, probably not going to pull that off. That's
Yeah.
well, why I work with you. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, no, I think that it's very doable. So
And it is, I mean, the sky's the limit. So if you have, and you don't even have to be an IT whiz. So I don't want to give that misconception that, only you specialize IT people, but if you're shown the way and you get to practice it a little bit, it's not that it's overly challenging. So if you had the staff or to dedicate to it, absolutely could a center take this and run with it and, really do, great things. So it's not that it's too challenging for someone to figure out on their own. It's just nice to have that support and that help, especially when you get started.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the candor and that input. So a few things or something I like a lot about, and I appreciate a lot about you, Chris, and you, Brad, and the other folks at PRCC is you are forward thinking. You have a desire to use the latest and greatest technology to improve your operations, to serve your constituents better, and you're willing to take the plunge to actually implement it and use it. And so I want to double click into that because you are forward thinking. I'd love to learn more about what else do you have planned next with Amazon Connect? Is there anything on the roadmap for using more AI or more advanced analytics or bolting on other features, expanding your online reporting? Tell me a little bit about your plans for the future. I'd love to hear that.
I think the big thing that we're waiting on right now is the online reporting software that we're using is made by our CAD vendor, but unfortunately the two do not meet in the middle.
Okay.
So um, allegedly they're coming out with a bridge so that it will import the data or export the data out of online reporting and import it into the CAD system. So that's step one. Because while we've taken away that component where someone's not on the phone, they're still manually importing those online reports into the CAD system.
Okay.
So once that's automated and done, that would be a big hurdle that we're facing. Um, Step two would most likely be um, gathering more information on what the next three things that we need to focus on. So if people are calling in and it's for messages for officers, now we got to find a way that we can expand our online reporting so people can start leaving messages for police officers. Um, Maybe it's a certain type of complaint, or maybe it's a certain uh, flow of information that we need to push out. So that's what we need to do next. And I'm hoping, and Brad can expand more on this, but I think they said that the online reporting to CAD was going to be sometime in 2025. It was supposed to be the end of this year. I think they pushed it back. Really, that's what we're waiting on, because while we are gathering complaints on there right now, I don't want to open up and expand and then have them get stuck on a computer pulling that information, so much information out of online reporting that is tying them up again. So I kind of feel comfortable right now where we are. It's not too much, it's not too little. It's right where we need to be. And then as we expand that other stuff, we'll most definitely expand AWS. I do want to touch on this because I think it's important to know. I have been asked by some people, especially since we've hired for almost all of our positions. When we are fully staffed and everyone is fully trained, are we going to get rid of AWS? And my answer is no. The reason for that answer is we'll circle back to the beginning. There are calls that we do not need emergency telecommunicators tied up handling. And I think it is important to identify that, because later on down the road, I would project maybe 5 years from now, this is going to be a standard. This is going to be so heavily used, it's going to be a thing of the past. If you think about it, 5 or 10 years ago, you could call your local bank, right?
Yeah.
And you could talk to a teller at your bank. You can't do that today. So we're a little behind the times in public safety. We're very reactive and not proactive. And I think that where the world is right now, especially with hiring emergency telecommunicators, this is going to be the new standard. This is going to be the way that you manage your call flow. I don't want to say that we're completely diverting everything to AI, because that is not the end goal. There is still a human element to this job, and we still need people to do this work. But what we need to do is we need to manage that call flow so that we don't burn our people out and we can keep them available for true emergencies.
Absolutely. I love that. Brad, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think like Chris said, one of our big hurdles is building that gap between our online reporting and into our CAD system, because I think once that is done, that will easily allow us to expand what we are capturing through AWS and allow us to build upon what we're doing, because we've taken other steps to make our CAD information more easily viewable and accessible to our end users, our police officers and our fire and EMS personnel. So when that, non-emergent report can come in right through, them calling, and it imports directly into CAD, and, the officers are getting that information more quickly, then we can expand, on our flows and, really explore what else can we get to them quickly? What else can we have the system do for us? And, I 100% agree with what Chris said. Is this, there's always that misconception, well, this is taking away jobs. It's not at all. That is not at all the purpose, because, echoing what he said, 100%, there's a human element to this job. You'll never replace that human element. But, as we mentioned before, it's all about finding those balances. And this allows us to do that. And I think even our employees, if you talk to them, they would all have the same message, that this has been a good tool. They would like to see more of it, but they know that we're still waiting for the other pieces of technology to come in line. So I think the opportunities are endless, and I think when we do expand, with the online reporting, going back to the analytics again, will help us expand on this, to know what direction what direction we need to take, and exploring more, what else AWS can do to help us meet those, those goals that we have, because I don't think that we have, obviously we only tapped into a little piece of this. So as we expand and having that, that guidance to see what else is out there for us to expand upon this, I think will be big.
I completely agree. And personally, I think that once the adoption increases and more PSAPs across the country deploy technology like this, it's going to have a tremendously positive impact on society as a whole. And the people of America will benefit from it. And so if it were up to me, every single PSAP would already be doing this because it's just a net positive for everybody. So if I am a director at a PSAP, whether that's in Maine or California or here in Minnesota, and I come up to you, Chris or Brad, and say, I'm kind of on the fence. Why should I do this? What would you say to that person?
Efficiency. So one thing that I always talk about, I always talk about the cardiac arrest and an animal complaint or something like that, right? But what about the person filing that animal complaint? So to them, their time's just as valuable. They're trying to contact us, right? Maybe we are tied up with true emergencies, still providing a disservice to that citizen that's calling for your assistance. So no matter how big or small the complaint is, they'll need to be handled. If they can be handled efficiently through AWS and then in online reporting, everyone benefits. It's easier on us. It's easier on the public. I honestly think that this will be what changes public safety and makes the job better. So when I started 14 years ago, I never would have thought that people were calling the police for some of the things that they're calling for today.
Yeah.
And while it may seem like it's not a big deal to me, and maybe I would handle things a little bit differently, right or wrong, that's their right to make that call and to ask for law enforcement assistance or animal control assistance. And they need to be afforded that right, that they can make that complaint and make that request. So why would you want your employees tied up dealing with something that is non-emergent when they could be dealing with stuff that is truly emergent? And why would you want to take up someone's day? I have been in the dispatch room before when we have taken a call from someone. It's been a non-emergent complaint, and 4 out of the 6 people that were working talked to that single complainant because they all started taking different 911 calls, and they had to keep putting that non-emergent complainant on hold. That is not good customer service, and it's not a good representation of our agency and how we want to provide a service to the public. Had we had this option, then that person probably would have been funneled right to online reporting, and he could have given his complaint, typed his story out, and we would have received it in the center, and he never would have been put on hold. It would have saved him 10 or 15 minutes of his time. It would have saved the stress of our employees juggling phone calls back and forth. It's truly, we need to reevaluate how we are providing a service to the public, and we need to ensure that we are providing the best service to them. Doesn't mean that we physically need to be on the phone providing that service. We need to give them the avenues to be able to file that complaint without being tied up for 20 minutes because we're busy. That's my thought.
Yeah, fantastic answer. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, I would say exactly that, because we even get it from, our end users that call in. A police officer calls in for something, wants to talk to a dispatcher, and they keep getting put on hold over and over and over again, and switching from person to person because, they're taking those true emergent calls. And going back to the fireworks example, if somebody calls in and, through a text message on their phone, they can get all the information they need, and it might answer every question they have, and they never have to speak to somebody or wait on hold. That is, a lot of times that's just what people want. They just want an answer.
Yeah.
And if we can provide that to them in a quick, efficient manner, like Chris said, you don't have to hold them up on the phone for 10 minutes to, because we're busy doing, other things or emergent things. People over time, like you said, and as this becomes kind of a new norm, um, they're going to become more accustomed to it. And when they get the information they want quickly or the avenue to report it in a quick manner, I think customer service grows. I think the public's appreciation for public service changes. Um, it'll take time, no doubt about it, but we have to start somewhere to make the change. And I think we've done that by starting small and expanding.
I completely agree. And I've said this before, I said it in the podcast conversation, but Penobscot County, you're pioneers in this. You're leading the way for the rest of the country, which is so cool to see because typically when you think about this sort of new technology adoption, people might think of somewhere in Chicago, Cook County, or LA County, some big city. But, Penobscot County is leading the way. And I think that's so, so great. And it's not like Penobscot is tiny by any means, but when somebody thinks about this, I just generally don't think they think about, a county like Penobscot. So again, I want to double down on my opinion that you're pioneers in this, and I appreciate what you're doing, and I think it's forward thinking, and some people could view it as a risk, and maybe it was, but it certainly paid off for you. So I'm glad you guys took the plunge, and I'm really hoping that others follow your lead. And that's partly why I wanted to put on this webinar today, is because it's something I believe in. I believe that more and more dispatch centers and PSAPs across the country need to do this, and they need to hear your story. And I want to help tell the country your story. So wanted to reiterate how much I appreciate your time here today, and you being willing to be candid and transparent about your experience and help me share it with the rest of the country. So just before we open up Q&A, because I did promise everybody we'd leave about 10-15 minutes for that, I wanted to hone in on one thing I mentioned earlier in the conversation, and that was putting some numbers to the outcomes that you've seen. I know you mentioned last time we spoke several months ago, you're seeing upwards of 40% call deflection, which is awesome. That is a lot of calls that your dispatchers no longer have to take. These are non-emergency calls that they probably shouldn't be taking in the first place. Has that number changed? Are there any other metrics that you wanted to touch on? Maybe we could take a minute or two to talk about that before we jump into the Q&A.
It definitely fluctuates, and I think that we see. So while we were running the fireworks flow, so basically from Memorial Day to just after the 4th of July, we were upwards of 40-ish%. I think we're back down right now around 20 or 25. It has been probably a few weeks since I've checked it. So it's not fresh in my mind, but it we also changed up the flow to make it a little bit more easy. We found that some of our language was a little confusing. I think I talked about that in the beginning of this. So that's definitely changed how much is actually getting through. But I think where we do see a decent amount, like Brad said, is when college is in session too. Like especially move in, move out when there's
Okay.
certain complaints. We definitely see an increase fall to spring. But I think so far, I'm not disappointed with the results that we've had. I think that it's only going to get better. And like Brad had said, that it's up to us, right? And no one else is going to make those changes. We control how the system works, and we control the effectiveness of it. So when it comes right down to it, if we want to make a change to better the system, that's coming from him and I, and obviously with the help of Morse. But yeah, I'm not disappointed with what we've had. I would say consistently we've run between 25 and 40%.
Okay.
Now, do all of those people put in an online report? No, they don't. But that's fine with me. We give them an avenue. So
Exactly. Brad, anything to add before we jump into the Q&A?
No, and like I think you said, I think it's some days we see like a very heavy diversion, and other days very light. And I think a lot of that, like if we were to, because when I look at it, it just gives me the date. But if I were to put the dates on the calendar and look at the days of the week, I think it would almost mirror like our call volume too. Like Sundays are usually a quieter day for us, but Mondays during this time are busier. And I think that the online reporting would kind of mirror that. So, we might get that low that it's only, 25% during this time frame, but that kind of also goes with our call volume as well. So I think during our higher peak times, we get more diversion, which is effective. And then, in our typically slower times, we get, the smaller diversion. So I think it's all on how, you look at the numbers to get the true representation of what it's doing. But 100% what Chris said, like I'm not disappointed by it. And I think when we went into this, we set the realistic goal. We weren't going to go into this and hope that just we can divert 80% of our calls, because that's a hefty lift. And we always said that we were going to go slow and expand. And I think like this has shown that, because I think if we would have tried to divert 80% is when we would have had failure, because we would have tried to do too much at once.
Yeah, that's a
So
good point.
I think that's a big thing to look at, but no disappointment here of how it's worked for us.
I think if I could just touch on one more thing, Dan, and then I know we
Sure.
got to get into questions, but
Yeah.
Brad just reminded me because he just brought it up. If I had one piece of advice to give someone that was thinking about doing this, it would be to take that slow, methodical approach and get comfortable and get the public comfortable with hearing the change. So I do know of a center that basically they built a call flow for every single nature code that they had, and on day one they turned on that entire call flow, and it failed miserably. They tried to do too much at once, so you really need to start slow and methodical and go through the process of learning what your calls are basically, because we can all look at the nature codes in the CAD calls, and I can tell you, oh, we had this many building fires this year, we had this many robberies. What I can't tell you is the reasons that someone's calling that admin line, right? Whether they want to leave a message for an officer, do they want to make a report, do they have a question? So gathering all of those analytics right up front in the beginning was a huge help, and then making small changes as we went along, because then we could track the efficacy of it, right? So being able to go, okay, we made a small minor change this week, and in the past 7 days, this is what we've gotten for results. Let's make this change next. and continuously reviewing that's been huge. Don't make any sudden huge changes. Keep it simple. Keep it simple and start slow.
That's great. Such great points. I really appreciate that. So I will open it up to Q&A, the last 5 or so minutes here. So for any attendees, if you don't mind, there's a little raise hand button at the top of your screen. If you do have a question, just press that button and I'll be sure to unmute you so that you can ask your question to Chris and Brad here. Looks like Jeff has a question. Cool. So Jeff, I just enabled your mic. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away. You might have to, Jeff, if you're trying to speak, you might have to go to the upper right-hand corner and click on that microphone button. It looks like you're still muted. And Jeff, for you and anyone else too, if you'd rather drop a question in the chat, there's a little chat button at the top of your screen. You can click that. Feel free to type it out and we'll make sure the question gets answered.
I just put my email in there too, so if anyone has any questions, they can email me.
Perfect. Of course, Sarah. Appreciate you being here. Jeff, yes, you can call in. That's fine. We'll wait for you. Number. I'm going to get the number for you, Jeff, in just a couple seconds here. Let's see. Okay, here's the number, Jeff. And then if it asks you for the phone conference ID, here it is. Give a couple minutes for Jeff to dial in here. There he is. Hey, Jeff, can you hear us?
Can you?
All right, cool. We can hear you. Good to hear
Okay,
your
this is
voice.
Jeff.
Ask away.
This is Jeff from Morse County. Couple of questions. When people call in, does your first message? Can you mute my other one because I'm getting an echo?
Oh, sure. I will do that right now. Disable mic. You should be good now.
Okay. When I call in, does it give the emergency? If it's an emergency, call 911 at the beginning.
Yes.
Okay. I've got a whole bunch of questions that you said something about turning something on during a storm. you have a bunch of storm-related questions that you have, or have you turned that on?
We're working on developing those right now. You might have to shut your speakers off on your computer, Jeff.
Yeah, I did. That cut down
Okay.
the echo, I think.
So yeah,
There we
we're
go.
gonna have storm related questions. I think during the windstorm last week, I know while I was here in the short 7 or 8 hours that I was here, we took over 10 calls where the person calling in just wanted to let us know that they were out of power and that they needed to get their power back on. So questions like that or statements like that, they're just like the fireworks flow. They're not going to come through to us anymore. So what I have for ideas on paper right now are basically when you call in, if it's a storm night and that flows on, you'll push whatever number it is. You'll push 1 for storm related information or complaints. And right from there, you can enter in whether it's a tree down, a wire down, you're out of power. If you are out of power and you want to report an outage, it's going to send you a text message with the number to CMP, Versant, Eastern Maine Electric, and whoever else services our area. It's going to push that information out and give people the phone numbers, because what are you and I going to do for someone that's out of power during a 70-mile-an-hour windstorm, right? You and I are going to do nothing for those people. We can't do anything. That's not our job. But what our job is to do is to hopefully give them the tools so that they can do it themselves and not bother our staff. And that's the goal. So
Who's your CAD?
we use Spillman.
Okay, so they're working on that then.
Yeah, so we use, what is it, Brad? Command Central Community.
Yeah, Command Central Community is our online reporting. And Command Central Community is a part of Motorola, and Spillman is obviously a part of Motorola as well. So they are working on the bridge to tie the Command Central Community online reporting direct to the CAD.
Okay. Now you said you can set it up to give numbers, and the other thing is you can forward it to anybody within your system as well, right?
Yeah, it's very customizable. So right now,
If somebody calls in and says, I need to speak to the jail, which we get a million calls, it will push that right to the jail instead of coming through us.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now,
Yep.
How does it handle nuisance callers? You know, I'm sure you get them, the ones that have mental health issues and everything, and they want to keep calling every 10 minutes. Do those still come through you? To you?
Those still come through to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
We handle
know
those.
I know
with,
I'm asking a
law
lot of
enforcement.
questions, and if somebody else wants to speak, just let them know. Is there
I
a
think you're good,
number
Jeff.
that
Yeah.
is there a number that you have, like if I want to call in as director or whatever, that I can bypass the system?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have an inside line.
Okay. Now, with using Morse, do they work as your IT?
No.
Or is your
So
your IT department still involved with this setup?
Sort of. So the only thing that our IT department does now is basically our IT department is responsible for the phone system. And why I say that is they have to do, and maybe Dan knows better than me, but there is a number, specifically a number that AWS is set up for. So let's say that you call in to 945-4636, right? That's our phone. That's our published phone number for PRCC. So when you call that line, the IT department has now auto forwarded that number to the AWS number, and that's how that call gets over to AWS. So our IT department has they have very minimal involvement in this project. Anything that I want to do from here on out, I do directly with Morse. I don't involve our county IT. In the beginning, they had a pretty decent sized project because we had to identify which phone numbers were coming in to the center, and then they had to take those and basically make a hunt group and then forward them to the AWS number.
Okay. The online reporting, is that something that goes through the phone system, or do they have to, is that through the computer?
So, online reporting, how it works, you call in, you press 2 to file an online report, and it will ask you from there whether you are calling from a landline or whether you are calling from a cell phone. If you are calling from a landline, it will tell you to push 9, and when you push 9, it will send you right through to dispatch, because obviously you can't get a text on a landline phone. If you are calling from a cell phone and you push, I think, 2 at that point, you will receive a text message from the system. That text message is a direct link to the online reporting system. So when you click on that, it's going to pop open our online reporting page, and then you just fill it out. And it looks like an updated CAD card. It has name, address, phone number, date of birth, your comments on the call, basically everything that the dispatcher would gather in the course of taking a complaint is built into this online reporting tool. So that's how that works.
Okay.
You can
So
do it from a computer, or you can do it from your phone.
Yeah. Talk to the AI, it will enter that information for them, right?
No, you have to hand type it. You hand type it. It's like going on a website and filling out your information.
Oh, okay. That answered that question.
Yep.
All right. I guess what it boils down to is my last question, which is the kicker. What does this cost?
Well, for 4 payments of $49.99. No, I'm just kidding. At the end of the day, Jeff, what we have paid for this is less than I have paid for one employee. And when I say that, I don't mean, at X dollars an hour. I mean one employee, full-time, benefits, retirement, everything else. I think so far, and I can't give you an exact number, but I have paid less than $100,000 in the past year. Now, that includes everything with Morse, that includes everything with Amazon. And I say that it's less than one employee, and I don't want anyone to ever think that, I'm going to cut one employee to fund this, because that's not the case. That's never the case. It's never been the goal. But when you think about it, when this thing is running, and we have 45% call diversion. Think about when especially during like the 4th of July time. You are diverting more than 45% of your non-emergency calls for the cost of less than one employee. That is huge. In the grand scheme of things, it's a very cheap solution for a long-term expensive problem. I want to say it was John Persano from Amazon who made the statement, and I'm paraphrasing. It was something to the effect that we are not hiring our way out of this one. And I think he's right. We're not. Because we see this constantly in a cycle where we will thrive and we will be full staffed. Soon we will be full staffed here. And we will be for probably 5 years if we're lucky. And then we're going to be right down the rabbit hole again, going through a significant staffing crisis. And why is that? It's because everything goes in cycles. The public sector booms when the private sector is not booming. When the private sector is right up there and there's a lot of money to be made and you can work from home, the public sector jobs are not as appealing anymore. So this is why I say we need to be looking at a solution to handle the call flow. Right now, if someone calls the inside line at my dispatch center, we can handle 6 calls because that's how many people I have working. Right now, if someone calls the published number from AWS and wants to file an online report, it will handle 499 people calling at the same time. So that's a drastic difference. So I get that, maybe just under $100,000 seems expensive to you or other directors. I don't think it is. I think it is a wise investment to help handle the call volume, lower the stress on our employees, and make their work life better.
And I'm imagining a lot of that, well, not a lot of that, but some of that money was for the upfront stuff, correct?
A lot of that was from the upfront stuff, yes. A lot of that was upfront.
So the continuing cost will come down.
Honestly, I think I pay between $400 and $800 a month to Amazon. That's my monthly fee. It all depends. It all depends on call volume, right? So with the storm that we had last week, my bill next month is probably going to be a little increased, and that's okay. During the slower times, my bill's a little less, and that's okay too, because it all depends on how much you use it. That is the good thing about it, is it is all dependent on how many calls are hitting that call flow.
Right. I see the call flow is and how it works. I mean, 25 to 40% deflection. That is huge. Now, when they send you an online reporting, does it notify you on your screen that you have something there, or do you have to keep checking it?
Yeah, so we have an online portal that we have up in the dispatch room, and they can watch the online report pop up.
Okay, so you have a screen just for that.
We don't have a screen just for that. We have it's like an internet browser. It's like being in your email.
Okay. I think that's what I have for questions right now. I thank you, and I'm I want to pursue this further. So Dan, I may want your information, and you have to begin the chat somewhere.
Yes. That's
Absolutely.
how we did it.
So
Real
Jeff,
quick.
go ahead, Chris. I don't want to interrupt you.
So real quick, I just want to touch on Maria's question while we're all here. Um, yes, that is something that we are going to work on. Something that is a little bit more difficult for us is the voicemail can be set up for officers, but where we dispatch for multiple police departments, that poses a difficulty for us because now you're working with 12 different IT departments, you're working with different phone companies. That's a pretty big undertaking. Now, I see Sarah's on. For someone like Sarah, um, in a department, if she's just dispatching for Waterville, Winslow, and maybe a couple others, and I know there's a lot of shared resources down that way, it might be a little bit easier of a task. But for a large center that has multiple different police departments or fire departments, some spread out over multiple counties, I don't think that's going to be as easy of a task to pull off. I think what we're going to have to look at is possibly expanding upon our online reporting to maybe make a message board, and then that message will end up in dispatch, and then we can just push it out by email. It would be a lot easier than taking a phone call for a message right in the moment. If we could just take that off of the online report and push it out by email. Yeah, it's still going to take some time, but you can do it as time allows, and you don't have to be tied up on the phone dealing with that right in the moment. Hope that makes sense.
Appreciate you expanding on that, Chris. And Jeff, I just got your email. So I'll shoot you an email, Jeff, and we can set up a time to talk. I'm pretty flexible. But we'll coordinate that offline.
Okay.
I even got time today. I'll send you a few times in a few minutes here.
Yeah, I probably won't have time today to reply, but I thank you guys. I appreciate the time. I know we have to look, and a lot of these questions I asked, there may be solutions down the road. If we don't ask them, there won't be a solution. So.
Absolutely. I loved your questions, Jeff, and I really appreciate you asking all those, because you're certainly not the only one. I'd be willing to bet that people here listening today, and just people in your field in general, have the same questions you do. So I appreciate you asking those. And I think that's it. I really do appreciate, again, Brad, Chris, thank you for your time. Everyone else in attendance, thank you for being with us today. I know we went a little bit over, so thank you for sticking around. It was a really great conversation. This recording will be available. I will email it out to everyone who attended. And it'll also be posted on YouTube probably within 48 hours. So I'll send out that link as well. And of course, you can share it with whoever you want to. So
Awesome.
thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah. And everybody have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.